You know that feeling when something seems too good to be true? It's the kind of feeling that settles in your stomach like a heavy stone, making your gut twist with the kind of unease that you can't shake. It's a feeling I should have trusted, a feeling that could have saved my life. But back then, I was hungry for the work and the money, so I ignored it. I've been a hacker for as long as I can remember. It started as a curiosity, just little things here and there, breaking into old websites, pulling up passwords, nothing serious. But over time, it turned into a skill set. People like me, we operate in the shadows. We're invisible. And when you work on the dark web, that's exactly how you like it. You're not supposed to know anything about the people you work for. It's safer that way. I had just finished up a fairly standard job when I received the message. It wasn't from anyone I recognized, but that's not unusual. Most clients prefer to stay anonymous. The message was short, one line, a single sentence. We need you to erase someone. No details, no explanations. Just the words hanging there, suspended in digital air. At first I thought it was a joke, but then came the file, a small encrypted folder labeled with just a string of numbers. That's when I should have stopped. I should have walked away. But instead, curiosity got the better of me, and I cracked it open. Inside was a single document, a picture of a person, and a name I didn't recognize. Nathaniel Reed. The photo looked like it had been taken years ago, grainy, out of focus, but enough was visible to show that Nathaniel was alive. The task was simple enough: erase all traces of him. A clean job, no collateral damage. Standard procedure, right? I didn't think much about it. I didn't ask any questions. The pay was more than enough to make it worth my while, and so I agreed. But that's where everything started to go wrong. After I confirmed the job, I was sent a series of locations, IP addresses, records, files. It was like I was piecing together a puzzle, one that didn't make any sense. There was an old credit card application for Nathaniel Reed, but it was dated years ago, before his apparent death. I found a LinkedIn account with his face, a profile that hadn't been touched in nearly a decade. There were photos on social media from years ago, showing him in different places around the world. Everything was adding up until I found the one thing that sent a cold chill down my spine: an obituary. I stared at the page for a long time, blinking in disbelief. It was from 2013, marking Nathaniel Reed's death at the age of 28, a car accident, a tragic, senseless death. But the thing that sent shivers crawling up my spine wasn't the obituary, it was the date. It was the same year that the photo had been taken. The photo I just decrypted, the one I was supposed to erase. The person in that photo was supposed to be dead, and yet there he was, staring at me from a digital screen. I ran my hands over my face, my mind racing. What the hell was going on? I should have stopped there. I should have questioned the job, the source, the reason behind it all. But I didn't. Maybe it was the money. Maybe it was the thrill of the work. But I pressed on. I began to erase the records. First, the LinkedIn account, then the social media profiles. It was a methodical process, like cleaning up after a mess. But as I deleted his existence, something strange happened. The more I removed, the more I felt a presence, a subtle pressure, as if I wasn't alone in the room. I turned around, half expecting someone to be standing behind me, but the room was empty. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I stared at the empty chair in the corner of the room. It was stupid, I know, but I had the feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't just the job. It wasn't just the picture or the obituary. It was the fact that, for the first time, I felt like I was being watched. And that was the first sign. The first clue that something much darker was unfolding. But I still didn't see it then. I couldn't. Because at that moment, I was already too far in. I'd already accepted the contract. And I had no idea how much deeper I was about to fall. I had no idea that the last job I'd taken would be the one to change everything. The next step of the job was to dig deeper into Nathaniel Reed's digital footprint. Usually, once I start erasing someone, it's like unraveling a thread. Everything comes undone smoothly, neatly. But Nathaniel's life online was different. It felt like every piece I deleted was replaced by another, almost instantly. I'd delete his name from a database, and it would show up again on a completely unrelated server within minutes. Social media accounts I had purged reappeared, as if I had never touched them. It wasn't just frustrating, it was impossible. It started to feel like someone was working against me, undoing my work as fast as I could manage it. But the more I tried to trace the source, the more the anomalies multiplied. I was good at this. No, scratch that. I was great. But this wasn't normal. It was almost as if the data was alive, fighting back against my attempts to erase it. At one point, I decided to step back and take a break. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the string of code running on my monitor. That's when the first message appeared. It wasn't from the client. It wasn't from anyone I knew. It was just a single line of text that popped up on my screen in the middle of my code editor. "Why are you looking for me?" My heart stopped. It wasn't a notification. It wasn't a message. It was embedded directly into the code I was working on. There was no IP trace, no source. It was just there. I stared at the words, my fingers frozen above the keyboard. I didn't know what to do. Was this some kind of elaborate prank? Was someone monitoring me? I typed a reply, my hands shaking. "Who is this?" The response was immediate. "You shouldn't have taken the job." I pushed my chair back, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't explain it, but there was something deeply unsettling about those words. They weren't a threat. They weren't even angry. They felt resigned. I forced myself to stay calm. It could have been anything. A client playing games, another hacker trying to intimidate me. But as I sat there staring at the glowing words on my screen, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was something else. Something worse. I closed the laptop and stepped away, pacing the room. My apartment was small, barely big enough for a desk and a bed, but suddenly it felt claustrophobic. I checked the locks on the door, pulled the blinds shut, even unplugged my router. But the feeling didn't go away. That night I didn't sleep. Every creak, every shadow felt like it was watching me, waiting for me to let my guard down. I tried to tell myself I was just being paranoid, that this was all in my head. But the real nightmare started the next morning. When I opened my laptop, my screen was already on. I was certain I'd powered it down the night before. But there it was, glowing faintly in the dim light of dawn. And on the screen was something that made my blood run cold. It was a photo, a grainy black and white image of my apartment, taken from the corner of the room where I had sat the night before. The timestamp on the photo, 3:15 a.m. I hadn't moved from my bed. No one else had been in the apartment. I checked the locks again, even pulled the camera off my laptop to see if it was malfunctioning, but the truth was staring me in the face. Someone, or something, was here, and I had no idea how deep I'd just gotten myself into. I didn't leave my apartment for days after finding that photo. I couldn't. My instincts as a hacker told me to investigate, to trace the source of the intrusion. But the part of me that was human, the part that felt fear, wanted to unplug everything and disappear. I chose to investigate. The first thing I did was scan my system for malware. Nothing. I checked the activity logs, hoping for a clue. Still nothing. It was as if the photo had appeared out of thin air, bypassing every security measure I had in place. Desperate, I decided to take a closer look at the files tied to Nathaniel Reed, the ones I hadn't yet erased. That's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Hidden metadata embedded in the files. At first glance, it looked like gibberish, strings of numbers and letters that didn't mean anything. But as I stared at them, something clicked. It wasn't random. It was a set of coordinates. I copied the numbers into a mapping program, and my screen zoomed in on a location, a remote property in the middle of nowhere. The area was miles from the nearest town, surrounded by dense forest. A chill ran down my spine as I realized something. The coordinates were just a few hours' drive from where I lived. I should have stopped there. I should have reported it, walked away, anything but what I did next. But something about the whole situation, Nathaniel, the files, the photo, felt like a challenge, like someone wanted me to follow the trail. So I did. I packed my laptop, a flashlight, and a portable battery, and set out just after sunset. The drive was long and quiet, The kind of silence that makes you hyper-aware of every little noise your car makes. The closer I got, the worse the roads became. Potholes turned into dirt paths, and the trees pressed in so tightly that my headlights barely penetrated the darkness. When I finally arrived, it was almost midnight. The property was a dilapidated farmhouse, its roof sagging, windows broken, the front door hanging off its hinges. But it wasn't the house that caught my attention. It was the light. A faint glow spilled out from one of the upper windows, flickering like a dying candle. I parked a good distance away and approached on foot, my flashlight off. The crunch of my boots on the gravel felt deafening, but the house stayed silent, unmoving. I reached the front door and stepped inside. The air was cold and stale, heavy with the smell of mildew and something metallic. The faint glow I'd seen from the window was gone now, replaced by complete darkness. I crept through the house, my flashlight casting long shadows across peeling wallpaper and broken furniture. The place felt abandoned, but there were signs of life: scattered papers, empty food wrappers, a laptop sitting open on a rickety table in the corner of the living room. Against my better judgment, I approached the laptop. The screen was on, displaying a single file directory. At the top of the list was a folder labeled Nathaniel Reed. My heart pounded as I opened it. Inside were dozens of files: photos, medical records, journal entries, all documenting Nathaniel's life in disturbing detail. But the last file was the one that caught my eye. It was a video time-stamped just 3 days earlier. I clicked it. The footage was shaky, clearly recorded on a handheld camera. It showed a man, thin, pale, with sunken eyes and disheveled hair, sitting in what looked like the very room I was standing in. He stared directly into the camera, his expression hollow and terrified. Then he spoke. "They won't let me go," he whispered, his voice trembling. "They said I'm not supposed to exist, but I don't know why. Please, if you're watching this..." A loud bang cut him off, and the camera jolted as he spun around. The video ended abruptly, freezing on his panicked face. I sat there staring at the screen, unable to move. And that's when I heard it. A faint creak coming from upstairs. I froze, every muscle in my body tensing as I stared at the dark staircase. The sound came again, slow, deliberate, like someone was walking across the floor above me. I wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at me to get out of that house, to leave everything behind and never look back. But instead I stayed, because as terrified as I was, I needed answers. I needed to know what I'd stumbled into. So gripping the flashlight like a lifeline, I took a deep breath and started up the stairs. The air grew colder with each step, and the creaking grew louder, closer. At the top of the staircase I stopped, my flashlight sweeping across the dark hallway. That's when I saw it, a shadow. It wasn't moving, but it was there, standing at the end of the hallway, darker than the darkness around it. And it was watching me. The shadow didn't move, but it didn't need to. Its presence was oppressive, as if the air around it had been sucked dry. I couldn't make out any features, no eyes, no outline of a face. Just a void standing at the end of the hallway, darker than anything I'd ever seen. My flashlight flickered, its beam sputtering like it was struggling against the weight of the shadow. I tightened my grip, forcing my feet to stay planted even as every instinct screamed at me to turn and run. Then it moved, not like a person, not in steps. It shifted almost imperceptibly, gliding forward without a sound. "Who are you?" I croaked, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. The shadow didn't answer. Instead it stopped, tilting slightly as if it were studying me. And then I heard it, a whisper. Not from the shadow, but from all around me. Soft, indistinct voices murmuring in a language I couldn't understand. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, forming a chaotic symphony of sound that made my head throb. I stumbled back, my flashlight beam shaking as I swept it across the hallway. The whispers followed me, growing sharper, more insistent. "Leave." That single word cut through the noise, clear and cold. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a command. But I didn't leave. I couldn't. Instead, I aimed the flashlight back at the shadow, only to find the hallway empty. The air was still heavy, the whispers still echoing in my ears, but the shadow was gone. I forced myself to move, one shaky step at a time, down the hallway. Each step felt like walking into quicksand, the darkness pressing in closer with every inch I gained. The hallway ended in a door. Unlike the rest of the house, this door was pristine. No peeling paint, no cracks. Just a solid, unmarked door with a simple brass handle. Something about it felt wrong, like it didn't belong here. I reached out, my hand trembling as I wrapped my fingers around the handle. The metal was ice cold, biting against my skin, but I turned it anyway. The door opened silently, revealing a small room bathed in the glow of dozens of computer screens. At the center of the room was a single chair, and in that chair sat Nathaniel Reed. He was alive. At least I think he was. His skin was pale and waxy, his eyes sunken and unfocused. Wires ran from his arms and chest to the computers, pulsing faintly with a sickly green light. He didn't react to my presence, didn't even blink. "Nathaniel," I whispered. His head jerked up at the sound of his name, his eyes locking onto mine. For a moment I saw something human in them, fear, confusion, but it was quickly swallowed by something else, something unnatural. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped, his voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated, my mind racing. "I was hired to erase you." Nathaniel's lips twisted into a bitter smile. "Erase me? You think you can erase this?" Before I could respond, the computers behind him flared to life, their screens filling with lines of code that moved too fast to read. The whispers returned, louder now, spilling out of the machines like a living thing. Nathaniel thrashed against the wires, his body convulsing as the green light intensified. "Run!" he gasped, his voice cracking with desperation. "You don't know what you've done!" I didn't wait to find out what he meant. The whispers turned into a roar, the screens flashing with symbols that seared themselves into my mind. I stumbled back, my flashlight clattering to the floor as I turned and bolted down the hallway. The house seemed to shift around me, the walls closing in, the stairs stretching out like an endless spiral. The whispers followed me, chasing me out into the cold night air. When I finally reached my car, I didn't look back. I drove as fast as I could, the dark forest blurring past me, the roar of the whispers fading with distance. But even as I put miles between myself and that house, I couldn't escape the feeling that something had followed me, something I couldn't see, something I couldn't outrun. I didn't stop driving until the sun began to rise, painting the horizon in pale streaks of light. By then, I was miles from the farmhouse, but I still felt its grip on me. The images of Nathaniel, the shadow and the whispers, played over and over in my mind like a corrupted file I couldn't delete. When I finally pulled into the parking lot of a rundown motel, exhaustion hit me like a tidal wave. I stumbled into my room, bolted the door, and collapsed onto the bed, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. The shadow standing in the hallway, Nathaniel strapped to the machines, his face twisted in agony. But worse than the visions was the sound. The whispers, faint and distant, still humming at the edges of my consciousness. I told myself it was just paranoia, stress. But deep down, I knew better. By the time night fell, my nerves were frayed. I sat on the bed with my laptop open, trying to make sense of everything. I sifted through the files I'd copied from the farmhouse, looking for answers, for anything that might explain what I'd just witnessed. That's when I noticed something new, a file that hadn't been there before. It was labeled echo.exe. My stomach twisted as I stared at it. I hadn't downloaded it, hadn't seen it during the job. It had appeared out of nowhere, like it had followed me from the house. Against my better judgment, I clicked on it. The screen went black. For a moment, I thought my laptop had crashed, but then a single line of text appeared, glowing faintly in the dark room. "You've seen too much." I slammed the lid shut, my heart racing. The whispers returned, faint but insistent, like they were coming from just outside the room. I glanced at the door, half expecting to see it swinging open, but it was still shut and bolted. That's when I noticed the glow. It was faint, just a sliver of light coming from beneath the door. I stood frozen, my breath catching in my throat. The light flickered, shifting as if someone, or something, was moving just outside. I crept toward the door, my pulse hammering in my ears. As I got closer, I realized the whispers were growing louder. I peered through the peephole. There was nothing there, just the empty parking lot, bathed in the flickering glow of a broken streetlight. But as I turned away, the whispers stopped. In their place came a knock, software deliberate, 3 taps against the door. I backed away, my hands trembling. Another knock came, louder this time, followed by a voice, low and distorted, like it was coming from a broken radio. "Open the door." I didn't move. The voice came again, sharper now, almost angry. "Open the door, or we'll come in anyway." I grabbed my laptop and bolted for the bathroom, locking myself inside. My mind raced as I searched for anything, any plan, any way to escape. The whispers started again, now inside the room. I pressed my ear to the bathroom door, straining to hear over the pounding of my heart. The knocking had stopped, but the whispers were closer now, circling the bathroom like predators stalking their prey. Then I heard it, a soft scraping, like nails dragging across the bathroom door. "Why are you still running?" the distorted voice asked, its tone almost mocking. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The scraping grew louder, more frantic, until it was a deafening roar. The door rattled on its hinges, and the light in the bathroom flickered. I braced myself, expecting the door to give way, but then everything stopped. Silence. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, waiting for the next sound, the next movement. But none came. When I finally opened the door, the room was empty. No whispers, no shadow, just the faint glow of my laptop, still sitting on the bed where I left it. I approached it cautiously, half expecting it to burst to life again. But the screen was blank, save for a single line of text. "You can't run forever." My chest tightened as I realized the truth. This wasn't just a job gone wrong. It was a hunt, and I was the prey. For the next few days, I kept moving. I didn't stay in one place for more than a night, never used the same route twice, and avoided connecting to the internet. I was running blind, fueled by equal parts fear and desperation. But no matter how far I went, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The whispers had become a constant presence, faint but unrelenting, lurking just beneath the surface of silence. Sometimes I'd hear them in the hum of a car engine or the rustle of leaves. Other times they'd rise in moments of quiet, their cryptic tones needling into my brain. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Every time I closed my eyes, I dreamed of the farmhouse, of Nathaniel strapped to the machines, his hollow gaze fixed on me. I woke up drenched in sweat, the whispers ringing in my ears louder than ever. But the worst part was the realization that the file, the job I had taken, was still unfinished. Nathaniel wasn't erased. Something inside me knew that until I completed the task, this nightmare wouldn't end. But going back online felt like signing my own death warrant. Still, I had no choice. I stopped in a small, anonymous town, using cash to rent a room in a seedy motel, with peeling wallpaper and a broken lock. With trembling hands, I set up my laptop, the glow of the screen cutting through the dim light. As soon as I connected to the internet, my screen flickered. The file was still there, echo.exe. This time I didn't hesitate. I opened it, bracing for whatever horror it might unleash. Instead, the screen filled with code. Lines upon lines of cryptic symbols and numbers scrolling faster than I could process. But hidden within the chaos, I saw something familiar. The coordinates to the farmhouse. And then, a single line of text appeared. "You know where it ends." I didn't want to go back. Every fiber of my being screamed against it. But deep down, I knew it was the only way to finish this. By the time I reached the farmhouse, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the overgrown grass. The house looked exactly as I'd left it, its windows dark and empty, the door slightly ajar. I stepped inside, the air cold and heavy, carrying the faint metallic tang I remembered all too well. The living room was untouched, the laptop still sitting on the rickety table. But this time, the screen was off. I made my way to the hallway, my flashlight slicing through the darkness. The door at the end of the hall stood open, the faint glow of computer screens spilling into the corridor. Nathaniel was still there. He looked worse than before, his skin almost translucent, the veins beneath it pulsing with the same sickly green light as the machines around him. He didn't look at me this time. His head hung low, his chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths. "Why did you come back?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I have to end this," I said, my voice trembling. Nathaniel let out a weak, bitter laugh. "You don't end it. It ends you." The machines behind him flared to life, the whispers swelling into a deafening roar. The screens flashed with images, faces, places, memories that weren't mine but felt disturbingly familiar. I approached him, my hands shaking. "What are you?" I asked. Nathaniel raised his head, his hollow eyes meeting mine. "A mistake," he said. "Something they created and couldn't control. Now they want to erase me, but I won't go quietly." The wires around him writhed like living things, the green light intensifying until it filled the room. "You have to finish the job," Nathaniel said, his voice rising above the roar. "Erase me, or they'll erase you." I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Do it!" he screamed, his body convulsing against the wires. With a surge of adrenaline, I typed the command. The machine screamed, the whispers turning into a high-pitched wail that pierced my ears. Nathaniel's body arched, the green light spilling from his eyes and mouth before he went still. The machine sparked and died, plunging the room into darkness. For a moment, there was silence. Then a single line of text appeared on my laptop screen. "It's done." I turned to leave, but as I reached the doorway, I felt it. The shadow. It was behind me, darker than ever, its presence suffocating. "You've erased him," it said, its voice low and cold. "Now it's your turn." The last thing I remember is the light from my flashlight flickering out, leaving me alone in the dark with the thing I couldn't outrun. Weeks later, a local paper reported on the discovery of a burned-out farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. Investigators found no bodies, no evidence of what had happened, just a single laptop, its screen cracked but still faintly glowing with the words, "You can't erase the void."